Chapter 17. Experiment Notes. Milo Neal. 12/7/96. I admit I was nervous about fitting in when I moved to St. Martin, but even in my wildest nightmares, I never expected to be public enemy number one by Christmas. Yet, here I was, Milo the Merciless, heartless, cold-blooded killer of poor, defenseless small animals, chickens a specialty. How did I get into this mess? Was it my fault? Was it everybody else's? Further study required. I kept analyzing the chain of events to try and detect the link where I went wrong. I mean, I did my project following the scientific method step by step. And now the whole school was up in arms over their darling Henrietta. Logic says that someone must be crazy here. The question, was it me? In Los Angeles, the life of one little chicken wouldn't cause this much ruckus. But this does not equal Los Angeles. I noticed that when the temperature went down to 11 below zero last night. Still, the Minnesota winter was balmy compared with the deep freeze I had to face every day at school. It had gone way beyond our little science class. The halls were plastered with Save Henrietta posters. Mr. DeLong and the staff took them all down, but by 9 the next morning, they'd be up again. I saw one that featured my picture from the Sentinel, doctored up to make me look like a medieval executioner holding a giant beheading axe. Another said Milo with a red line through it, like a no smoking sign. Everywhere I looked, something about chicken rights was staring back at me. On Monday morning, we were all welcomed back from Thanksgiving weekend by a giant banner over the front entrance of the school. Make friends, not cutlets. Didn't it figure? Even in a wind chill of -40, I couldn't get sick enough to miss a day of school. The only person who would walk with me, talk to me, and sit with me in the cafeteria was ZG. Just my luck. If there was anyone in all of St. Martin I'd have enjoyed being ignored by, it was him. He called it friend loyalty, and although I had a bit of a problem with the friend part, he definitely was loyal. It's not your fault everybody else was too stupid to understand your project, he told me several times that miserable week. Heaven help me, I was so shaken up that I appreciated having ZG to confide in. I don't know, maybe it is my fault, I said. Everybody else sees something special in that chicken. Not everybody, ZG offered. I don't. Yes, you do, I countered. They see something to love, you see something to hate. I just see a link in the food chain. Why am I the only one? Well, said ZG thoughtfully, have you tried? Tried what? Getting to know Henrietta. There's nothing to get to know, I exploded. But that day after school, I made an effort. I sat cross-legged on the floor and stared into the cage. What I saw was really quite impressive. The creature that had been a tiny wisp of fluff a scant 2 months ago was now covered in lustrous white feathers. Her red comb was well defined, and in spite of the setback, she was plump and healthy. She'd been on a full diet for 2 weeks now. In fact, my calculations had been remarkably accurate. The subject was now a full-grown hen, ready for the dinner table. Wait a minute. The logical scientific approach was exactly what I was trying to avoid here. I needed to be totally emotional about this if I was going to see what other people saw. I said, okay, Henrietta. Yes, I broke my own rule and called the specimen Henrietta. Okay, sweetie, strut your stuff. She clucked, she twitched, she bobbed her head up and down like chickens do. There was no recognition of me as the caregiver. None of the personality KMG seemed to see. No sign of the keen intelligence so obvious to JS. Not a trace of the fun-loving joie de vivre that won LM's heart. I didn't feel inspired like the hockey team. I didn't even observe anything to dislike a la ZG. She was, all things considered, a chicken. Subject specifically, link in the food chain, the wind beneath nobody's wings. Conclusion, I'm not the one on a step with the band. They're the one on a step with me. There was a knock on my bedroom door. I leaped to my feet as my mother let herself in. Milo, may I have a word with you? A word usually meant 500,000 million words, plus or minus 10%, for the study required. Sure, Mom, what's up? I just got off the phone with Mr. DeLong, she said worriedly. He told me what's going on at school, and he suggested I talk to you about changing the experiment. I stuck up my jaw. How? By eliminating the part where you eat Henrietta. That is the experiment, Mom. There is nothing else. I can't change it. You mean you won't? I tried to be patient. If you order a cheeseburger, hold the bun, hold the cheese, hold the meat, you've got a handful of nothing, right? Well, that's what you're left with when you have a food chain experiment that defies the food chain. My mother sighed. Mr. DeLong said the whole school is up in arms over your project. Some of the kids are so upset that their parents are calling the office to complain. They've even had a call from the Sentinel. Look, Milo, I grew up in St. Martin. It's not like Los Angeles where something like this would barely be noticed. These are nice, warm people, but if the story gets around, you may never live it down. Please, just this once, I want you to give in. I folded my arms in front of me. And take an incomplete in science? Mr. DeLong said you'd get an A. They'd still pick you for the science fair. It would be an incomplete to me, I insisted. They could give me Dad's Nobel Prize and it would still be an unfinished project. She looked at me very seriously. I admire your integrity, but I think you're making a big mistake over something that's just not that important. And she let herself quietly out of my room. Mom has a nasty habit of cutting the legs out from under you just when you think you're on solid ground. I looked to the cage, and this time I really wanted it. I truly, honestly was dying to see even the slightest indication that there was somebody in there. The specimen twitched and warbled. Nobody home. Deep down, I knew Mom was right. I was as cooked as the subject was going to be. Except, here in St. Martin, all I had of my dad was the stuff he taught me about experiments and scientific method. I was out of his life completely. But if I could win the science fair, that would equal one huge reminder that I was his son. I would almost be following in his footsteps. Maybe then he'd call more often and come to see me. Even invite me back to California for a long visit. This was more than a science fair to me. It was equal a chance to start over with my father. Even with all the tension at home and school, nothing compared to the pure, unadulterated agony of the hockey games. I couldn't very well relinquish my subject to those well-meaning lunatics, which meant that I had to accompany the specimen to the rink. I suppose I could have refused, but I was so hated already I didn't dare make things worse. There I'd sit, LM despising me on the left, KMG reviling me from the right, watching a sport that made as much sense to me as a pet rock. So I didn't complain too much when AL told me that Saturday's game would be in Fairmount, about 30 miles away. And when I found out that this match would determine the South Minnesota Championship. I allowed myself a faint glimmer of hope. Please, oh please let the team win. Then they'd be happy, they'd no longer need my chicken, and maybe, just maybe, that might ease some of the pressure at school. The bus ride was pure torture. 30 minutes in a confined space with large people who hated me. It was far worse than the games themselves, where the players' dirty looks were covered by their advisors. At one point I heard LH trying to convince Davey to take a slap shot at my head. I didn't think it was very funny, but it drew a big guffaw from Coach C. Are you kidding? If Vince could aim that thing, he could be in the NHL! I don't have to be here at all, I announced to the bus. Who sat for you? Came a chorus of snarls from above the shoulder pads. And neither to this cage, I finished. Coach C broke the unpleasant standoff. All right, listen up, he ordered. You all know where we stand. Fairmount's in first place with a record of 14-5. We're a half game behind the 13-5 with one tie. Which which means this tie still leaves us in second place. We have to go for the win. We're gonna crush those guys, roared LH, and the entire team joined in a blood-curdling roar. The coach beamed with pride. Why did athletes feel the need to rampage like gorillas in order to prepare for a game? Further study required. I had a vision of the Fairmount Flyers in their locking room, beating their breasts and howling in honor of our arrival. Their fans were certainly in a state of high excitement. I was appalled by the hostile reaction the Rangers received when they took the ice. But when I mentioned it to Coach C, he looked at me as if I just arrived from Mars. They're supposed to hate us, Neil. We're the other team. I replied, much like the resentment of rival scientists when my father won his Nobel Prize. His response was a look blank enough to use as a billboard. Before the opening face-off, I had to hold my specimen over the bench so the players could bonk their helmets into the cage and run their sticks along the bars. Go get 'em, Henrietta, breathed AL, his face so intense it was almost scary. It's all up to you, girl, added JS. Was I missing something? How was it possible for my subject to influence the outcome of a sporting event, especially when she was in a cage outside the field of play? Further study required. Of course, I was not the best person to judge a game of ice hockey. What I saw best resembled a riot on ice. Upon closer inspection, I discovered the puck, which told the combatants whom to brutalize. When someone scored, his entire team would perform the Minnesota equivalent of an earthquake. I got the impression that these schools were evenly matched, and the earthquakes took place equally often on each bench. How was it that I could understand high-level science but couldn't make heads or tails of the chaos on the ice? Further study required. I concentrated on the scoreboard. At least that way I would know who was winning, although it looked like nobody was going to win this game. When the clock ticked down to the final minute, the score was deadlocked 7-7. I suppose it was the thought that the season was nearly over that induced me to try and make up with the hockey team. Congratulations on a well-played game, I called down to the bench. You can be really proud of a tie against such a strong opponent. The coach stared at me. Neil, are you out of your mind? Milo, you big dope, AL shouted up at me. A tie does us nothing. We need a win or Fairmount takes the championship. Coach C shifted into high gear. Lurie, Sorrentino, get in there. Pull the goalie. Put who you use in the slot. Tell Tenorio to pinch. No, I don't have a clue what any of that meant. When the puck was dropped, all that strategy boiled down to this. Both teams stampeded the Fairmount net. They met with a resounding crunch that shook the building. There they lay, piled up by sandbags, 3 feet in front of the empty Flyers' goal. There was an enormous gasp from the crowd. Maybe they were searching for the puck, which had disappeared under the mountain of fallen players. Silence followed as the Rangers looked on in desperation, their championship hopes down to the final dwindling seconds on the clock. And suddenly, there it was, at the edge of the pile, just beyond AL's shoulder, the puck! Adam, behind you, I shouted. Lying flat on his stomach under 2 Fairmont players, AL pulled his stick around, sliding it blindly along the ice. It batted into the puck with a tiny click. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the puck trickled over the goal line into the net. The buzzer sounded to end the game. Final score, 8-7 for the South Minnesota champion Rangers. But Adam, I insisted for the 20th time on the bus ride home, it was me! I was the one who yelled behind you! I don't know why I cared so much. Maybe I felt that if I was going to get involved with anything as meaningless as an ice hockey game, I should at least get some credit for it. Marlowe, give it a rest, AL groaned, absently stroking my specimen's feathers. For some reason, they had switched places between their trophy and my chicken. The championship cup was locked in the cage. You weren't even watching the game. At the end, I was, I defended myself. How else could I have seen the puck in the scramble? Your voice is too high, JS insisted. The guy who yelled was, deeper, a baritone. Agreed Brendan. No, it was higher, STR. You'd higher, and kind of raspy, like an old guy. It was me, I cried. These hockey players could be maddeningly stubborn. Further study required. A.L. handed my specimen over the seat and regarded me with genuine pity in his eyes. You don't have to lie, Milo. If you're trying to make us love you, forget it, snarled L.H. No one will ever forgive what you're going to do to Henrietta. I sighed in defeat. Well, at least she's not your mascot anymore. That ought to make it easier. J.S. stared at me. Are you nuts? I spread my arms wide. The season just ended! A.L. faced me. Milo, we're South Minnesota champions! We have to play the Canadians next Saturday! We can't face them without Henrietta! But, I stammered. I couldn't remember being at such a loss for words since the day my parents told me they were splitting up. But the science fair is next Saturday. The specimen won't... she can't... A chorus of outrage cut me off. Next year, my science project isn't going to involve any type of life form unless it's already dead before I can develop a fan club. The total irony was that if I had kept my eyes on the scoreboard instead of the ice, I never would have spotted that loose puck. Ergo, I couldn't have shouted to A.L., and the clock and the season would have expired with the score still tied 7-7. No championship, no Canadians, no date with destiny for my chicken. It was undeniable. Victor Neal's son, the genius in training, had grown up to be the biggest idiot on the face of the earth. Maybe I was adopted. Further study required.